The Christadelphians, a cult under the illusion of autonomy. The Christadelphians often claim that they are an independent, non-centralized Christian movement, unlike groups such as the Jehovah's Witnesses, who have a governing body that dictates doctrine and belief. However, when examined more closely, the Christadelphian structure is far from autonomous. Despite their insistence that each ecclesia, congregation, operates independently, the reality is that the Christadelphian movement is controlled by the writings and legacy of Robert Roberts, the successor to their founder, Dr. John Thomas. Robert Roberts played a crucial role in shaping Christadelphian doctrine and structure. His book, The Ecclesial Guide, lays out how Christadelphian congregations should function, while the Birmingham Amended Statement of Faith, BASF, establishes doctrinal standards that all Christadelphians must accept. This statement is divided into 3 sections: doctrines to be accepted, doctrines to be rejected, and the so-called commandments of Christ. Every Christadelphian is expected to adhere to these doctrines, and deviation often results in exclusion or fragmentation into smaller fellowships. While they claim independence, their strict adherence to these 19th century documents proves otherwise. The Christadelphian magazine serves as a controlling factor within their community, acting as a central authority for announcements regarding baptisms, removals from fellowship, and transfers between ecclesias. Despite claiming to be an autonomous organization, Christadelphians require letters of recommendation for members moving from one ecclesia to another. They justify this practice by appealing to biblical precedent, yet their interpretation is flawed. While Paul mentions letters of recommendation, his words in 2 Corinthians 3:2-3 indicate that he was speaking of a spiritual letter, not a physical one. He states, "You yourselves are our letter of recommendation, written on our hearts, to be known and read by all." Paul emphasizes the inward transformation of believers rather than the necessity of formal documentation. By insisting on publicizing membership changes, Christadelphians contradict their own claim of independence. A truly autonomous group would not require a centralized system to track its members' movements or enforce fellowship rules. Their rigid structure and reliance on written approvals show an internal bureaucracy that undermines their assertions of congregational autonomy. Instead of focusing on spiritual growth and unity, their system places an unnecessary emphasis on regulation and control. One of the most telling signs that the Christadelphians function as a cult is their obsession with doctrinal purity, often at the cost of unity. They engage in endless debates over the nature of Jesus and the nature of Adam, causing rifts between different ecclesias. Many Christadelphians argue over the precise meaning of words in the BASF, leading to continuous splintering of the movement. Each faction insists they alone have the correct interpretation, even though they all subscribe to the same general teachings. The result is division, hostility, and a lack of unity, all of which contradict their claim to be God's chosen people. If they were truly led by divine wisdom, they would not be in such constant conflict with one another. This hypocrisy is further exposed in their contradictory practices. One of their foundational books, Christendom Astray, written by Robert Roberts, harshly criticizes mainstream Christianity for adopting pagan traditions and unbiblical customs. However, despite this condemnation, many Christadelphian groups still celebrate Christmas, have church choirs, and participate in social events that resemble the very things they claim to reject. If they truly believed that these traditions were unscriptural, they would not continue to practice them. Their selective application of their own teachings exposes their double standards. The founder of the Christadelphian faith, Dr. John Thomas, plagiarized and stole his ideas of Bible prophecy from other Protestant theologians. His interpretation of Bible prophecy is not unique. He simply copied it from other Protestant ministers. Additionally, Christadelphians display a troubling attitude toward Bible prophecy. In my experience as a former member of the Stockport Central Fellowship, I noticed that they largely reject any serious study of prophecy. They claim that all prophecy has already been fulfilled and that believers are simply waiting for the return of Jesus. This is because the Stockport Ecclesia seems to reject Dr. Thomas's interpretation of prophecy, which was the classical Protestant interpretation. Instead, the Stockport Ecclesia follows a more Catholic understanding called preterism, as presented by the false prophet Harry Whitaker from the Crew Ecclesia. When I expressed interest in attending a prophecy event in Rugby, I was strongly discouraged by members of my ecclesia who insisted that the teachings presented at the event were incorrect. This reaction showed that Christadelphians are not united in their beliefs, and they actively try to suppress differing interpretations within their own movement. A group that discourages the exploration of biblical prophecy is not a movement led by God, but one controlled by human opinions and rigid traditions. Beyond theological inconsistencies, Christadelphians also reveal their hypocrisy in political matters. They claim to be conscientious objectors, refusing to serve in the military, yet they support the modern state of Israel, despite its involvement in violent conflicts, including attacks on hospitals, schools, and innocent civilians. They refuse to acknowledge the rights of Palestinians and blindly support Israel's actions, showing that their supposed moral stance on war is selective and politically motivated. Furthermore, many Christadelphians openly support Donald Trump, treating him as some kind of political savior, despite his divisive and morally questionable policies. Their idolization of Trump contradicts their claim to be a people separate from worldly politics. Ultimately, the Christadelphians are not an autonomous, independent fellowship, nor are they truly committed to the teachings they claim to uphold. They are a fragmented, controlling, and contradictory religious movement, held together not by divine truth, but by the writings of a man who died in 1898. Their divisions, their hypocrisy, and their lack of love for one another prove that they are not a people led by God, but by human traditions and personal pride.